Hi everyone, welcome to Value. So today we're looking at Manchester United. If you're a football fan, you know Manchester United. If you're not a football fan, you've probably heard of Manchester United because it's one of the biggest clubs in the world. And right now, the owners are considering selling the club. And that kind of makes everyone in the stock market pretty interested, particularly around the valuation of the club right now. It's about $3 billion after rising by almost 25%. And get this, the owners actually want to sell this for a lot more than the current value. So hence, it kind of leaves a bit of wishful thinking in a sense that they could potentially sell it at a much higher valuation than the market currently values in terms of this $3 billion mark. There's even been some whispers that Apple is eyeing up Manchester United. So Apple eyes Manchester United, which is kind of interesting. Apple says right here, Apple could pay £5.8 billion or up to £7 billion. So I think that's kind of wishful thinking. I don't know if Apple actually really wants to get into this type of business. It's interesting that they are connected to it, but I don't think they would actually put an offer and conclude a deal. But at the same time, that number that's being tossed around, it just shows you the potential of the value that this 3 billion does not reflect. And Manchester United is actually worth much more than 3 billion. And I think if the owners manage to get a sale through, they could potentially get much more than that 3 billion. And there's hence why there's kind of some really kind of risk-free kind of gain potentially in this. So if I take you to this page here, it kind of puts clubs at the maximum value that the market kind of sees it at. We currently have Barcelona. That was ranked last year as the top most valued club around the world at 4.7 billion, and then we had Real Madrid 4.7, Bayern Munich 4.2, and Manchester United 4.2 billion. So even on last year's valuation, we have about 4.2. So you look at this, and potentially on a minimal basis, this stock is probably undervalued by possibly 30%. Potentially it could be selling for, it could basically go up 100% if they get a really good sales price. So as we put it here, there was a part that I was reading in this article that kind of also talked about the potential pricing that the owners were waiting for. So here we go. In an interview with Manchester Evening News on Wednesday, O'Neill said he would consider making an offer if the Glazers lowered their unrealistic demands amid reports a family could be seeking up to £5 billion, which is $6 billion. So if you don't know who the Glazers are, they're the owners of Manchester United, and they're the ones that want to sell this club because after the Ronaldo interview, if you've heard of that, basically a lot of kind of truths about the club were just leaked out, and the whole idea was, hey, this club's got old infrastructure, it has not been upgrading anything, it's got a lot of debt. Rising interest rates are kind of going to really cause a lot of damage because they may not actually be able to keep up with the rising interest rates. And now basically the Glazers are trying to sell the club off while they're still able to get a peak valuation, because anyone that's been following the Premier League knows that Manchester United has in a sense been decaying. It has not even looked like it could realistically win the Premier League. So that's the kind of situation that they're in, and the owners are basically wanting to sell before the club looks even worse. If the reputation continues to be damaged, then potentially it is going to be worth less. So they are looking for about $6 billion. Potentially, even if they get $4 to $5 billion, this market cap is at $3 billion. So you do the math, and no matter how you put it, that's kind of like easy money if they can get a sale through. Or potentially just merely on rumors, this stock could jump another 30% to like that $40 billion mark, which is I think what the market kind of sees it at. I think the market kind of sees the value of this club at $4 to $5 billion, and hence why at a $3 billion, even after this 25% jump, it's still a little undervalued in this sense. So if we look at the share price of the stock, it has not fared well in the long term. Like the stock was relatively 5 years ago over $20, 21.50, and now it's at 18.80 after a 25% jump, and it's years later. This stock sunk as low as $11, which is kind of interesting because it kind of makes you think, hey, actually, next time round, you really want to pay attention to the stock because potentially, if it sinks that low again, clubs like this kind of just sit there with the potential that they could be sold at a lot higher, a lot higher amounts than they are kind of currently being reflected on the stock. Like even Chelsea was sold at £2.5 billion, and that starts to make the owners actually think about it. Hey, we've actually got a much more valuable club, so potentially we could sell it for something a lot, more valuable. So yeah. In terms of here, look, so we've got Chelsea here at $3.2 billion, and then so for Manchester United to get $4.2 billion, it is it's quite realistic. So that's the thing. That's kind of what's got this stock up, and one that I kind of think you should really take notice of because it's the type of stock that the owners are paying more for the value of the club, its reputation, its image, its fan base, rather than the actual revenues. So in terms of revenues, they're all right. They kind of do okay. Like I think they've been running a fairly bad kind of model right now where they do spend quite a bit. So the revenue is 643 million, and the operating income was 167 million dollars. And if you actually compare, they've got one of the best operating incomes when you compare against the top clubs around the world. So yeah, that's one thing. Like in terms of spending, just on players alone, in the last decade or so, they've spent well over £1 billion, which is kind of surprising, right? Because they are, um, that they spent that much trying to bring the club back up, but they haven't. So that's kind of the one thing as well that's why I think the owners right now want to consider selling the club because they've spent so much. The club has not improved as much as they would have wanted, and they've got aging infrastructure. They need a new owner, and hence why I think that's going to be a big factor in a sale actually being quite realistic. So yeah, like apart from that, I think that's all I really want to say about this. But yeah, like I think if you've got the time and you think it's worth a punt, then potentially it's something that could pay off quite well in a sense with relatively low risk. Because if you actually consider, there's another table that actually pops down here that the most valuable clubs in the world in terms of the year, like back in a decade ago, back in 2007, Manchester United was worth $1.4 billion, and then zoom up another 5 years later, they're worth $2.2 billion. So that's one thing. The value of the brand and the club and the fan base, it just increases in value every year. So even if you make a bad decision, or well, not necessarily a bad decision entirely, but you kind of buy in and nothing matures, it's just a matter of a waiting game because eventually the club's value should be reflected into the stock, and it will jump up one day. But of course, it's a massive waiting game if they do not get a sale and then the stock sinks back. But if you're a fan, why not buy some as a bit of a kind of an invested fan, I guess, in a sense. If you're investing in stock, you're investing in the club, you want to, make sure the club's actually running really well, and it could be one of those things. Yeah, so that's all I really wanted to say about that. That I just thought it was more of an undervalued play, considering the price tag is actually out there around what the owners want. They want $5 to $6 billion, potentially even more. And the stock value is currently starting at $3 billion. So no matter how you do the math, they're going to get more than $3 billion, and hence why if they can get a sale through, then it's going to be quite a worthy kind of investment. Alright, until then, good luck investing everyone, and if you've got any comments or questions, post below.